People who don't fit in aren't unable to join the crowd, they choose their solitude. Today, we're diving deep into Hermann Hesse's masterpiece, Steppenwolf. This book stands as a defining work of Hesse's mid-career and a true milestone in his writing. More than that, it's a fictionalized account of Hesse's own life, chronicling the spiritual journey of a middle-aged man racked by split personalities and inner agony, and how he achieved self-salvation by finally confronting his inner world. In modern society, honestly, you can see echoes of the Steppenwolf in countless people. The protagonist, Harry Haller, was initially a brilliant, highly sought-after writer. His ideas and philosophies once shone with dazzling brilliance. But then, out of the blue, his life was hit with an earth-shattering upheaval. In 1914, World War I broke out, plunging the German people into a state of extreme fervor. Yet Hesse, a German himself, voiced strong anti-war opinions at the time. Consequently, he was not only shunned by the media and his fellow writers, but also rejected by his country, even facing threats to his life. Harry, much like Hesse, saw his anti-war work attacked and criticized by the media and writers right before the war erupted. The public even labeled him a traitor. For a time, he lost all his reputation and fortune. Even love and trust abandoned him. His wife then threw him out of the house, and all the friends who once revered him vanished. From that point on, Harry lived the life of an outcast, with only solitude, contradiction, and suffering as his companions. Isolated and far from his hometown, Harry moved into the attic of a petty bourgeois apartment. To outsiders, he was a poor conversationalist, a solitary figure, and an unsociable man. But Harry's unsociability actually stemmed from his intense disgust for the petty bourgeoisie. He despised their complacency, their robust health, and their comfort. He loathed their carefully cultivated optimism and their utterly domesticated, trivial daily habits. The irony, however, was that the place he rented was invariably a petty bourgeois home. He liked the quiet, clean rooms in these homes and the polite, calm atmosphere that permeated the space. Yet, step past that pristine hallway and into Harry's room, and the scene was dramatically different. Books and wine bottles were piled up in disorder, with cigarette butts scattered all over the floor. The room, to put it mildly, was unbearably messy and filthy. For the petty bourgeoisie, a dull life might be happiness. But for Harry, those repetitive days of just reading, bathing, and taking walks were utterly agonizing. It was as if a middle-aged man, despite his many grievances with life, was powerlessly trapped in a mediocre, neither hot nor cold existence that he could, for the moment, just barely tolerate and manage. Sometimes, Harry would calmly contemplate whether he should use his razor to end his life. Other times, a powerful lust would surge within him. This craving simultaneously made him long for intense stimuli and powerful emotions, and enraged him against his current trivial, conventional, stable, and utterly deadened life. Whenever this desire erupted, his inner self would go mad, wanting to smash something or beat himself black and blue. He would even feel the urge to go out and disrupt the normal social order. This same lust was the reason he became addicted to alcohol. Every time he went out, Harry would pretend to be cheerful. Yet, whether at the theater or the cinema, he couldn't stay long. He simply couldn't comprehend what kind of joy ordinary people found in crowded trains and hotels, in busy coffee houses, or in small, noisy, bustling taverns filled with music. Compared to the secular world, he could only find true pleasure when reading the poetry of Goethe, contemplating a thought by Descartes, or listening to Mozart's music. But these pleasures, the world at large only sought and appreciated in works of literature at best. If applied to real life, they would be dismissed as fantastical and impractical. Harry reasoned that if the world's views were correct, if popular entertainment and these easily amused people were right, then he was the one who was wrong. Consequently, he had no sympathy for this empty and impoverished spiritual world. He felt like a beast, lost in an alien world, unable to find his true home or nourishment. Harry's conflict is actually very common around us. In life, the majority of people follow the rules. When you're young, parents and teachers tell you what you should and shouldn't do. For example, you must be a polite, good child, or a hard-working, good student. If you dare to resist, others will label you as disrespectful or a bad student. As you grow up, society also dictates what you should and shouldn't do. For instance, at work, even if you dislike a colleague, you still greet them when you meet. Even if you don't like drinking alcohol, at a party, you'll still say to your boss, "I'd like to offer a toast," sir divided by ma'am. Of course, as a newcomer, you could ignore them, but the consequence of refusing to follow the crowd is usually isolation and becoming an outcast. This is a process of domestication. We go from daring to speak up, to charge ahead, to cause trouble, to becoming reserved, swallowing our grievances just to keep the peace. However, in this submission and compromise, our sense of self, though suppressed, never truly disappears. It might suddenly pop out after you toast your boss, making you feel utterly fake. It might also whisper to you during a late-night shift, asking what happened to that young boy who was once full of dreams. Thus, Harry, who yearned for independence, gradually became conflicted after refusing to conform. On one hand, as a humanist who spoke out against the war, he never expected the world's backlash and isolation. This shattered his illusion that human nature was inherently good, especially since he knew the horrific consequences of war. Furthermore, he was a man of ideals and pursuits. He loved the works of great minds like Goethe and Mozart. Therefore, the world he longed for was one of depth, where people could discuss philosophy and art. But reality was drastically different from his imagination. Post-war Europe was plagued by social chaos and spiritual emptiness. The middle-class people surrounding him, the petty bourgeoisie, were all mundane types who liked drinking coffee, going to bars, and engaging in nothing but fake social interactions. They were utterly indifferent to the genuine philosophy and art he held dear. What was more tragic was that the spiritual world Harry himself yearned for was also unsuccessful. Because he discovered that while he hated the mundane, he couldn't escape it. He was just like those vulgar people, enjoying smoking and drinking, and even going to bars to find lovers to release his desires. But every time he indulged, he regretted it, despising his own behavior, realizing he was no different from those vulgar people. However, his ideology was quite extreme. He wanted to go all the way on his chosen spiritual path. In this regard, he wasn't as shrewd as the petty bourgeoisie. They simultaneously believed in God and satisfied their personal desires. They pursued the spiritual while also catering to their material wants. They always sought a compromise, finding a middle way between countless extreme and opposing ideologies. Given all these circumstances, Harry suffered from a partial personality split. Then one day, Harry received a small booklet titled Treatise on the Steppenwolf. In it, he found enlightenment. Coincidentally, the protagonist of this booklet was also named Harry. This character was called the Steppenwolf. Within the Steppenwolf Harry, both human nature and wolf nature coexisted. Harry's human nature represented a world of character full of ideas, emotions, culture, gentleness, and nobility. His wolf nature, on the other hand, represented the dark world of crude traits like lust, brutality, cruelty, and baseness. Moreover, the wolf and human natures were anything but harmonious. They were opposed and hostile to each other. For example, when the human Harry conceived of a noble idea or performed a good deed, the wolf nature inside him would mock him as a fake. Conversely, when the wolf Harry erupted, making sarcastic remarks about the artificial and perverse habits of others, the human nature would step in to criticize him for his bestial outburst, thereby ruining his good mood and preventing him from enjoying the wild pleasure of his wolf nature. Simply put, the human nature wanted to control the wolf nature, and the wolf nature wanted to destroy the human nature. Consequently, the Steppenwolf was unhappy most of the time. This was because anyone he loved or who loved him only appreciated one facet of him. Some loved him for his cultured, intelligent human nature, but were immediately scared and disappointed once they discovered his wolf nature. Others loved him for the wild, rebellious, and untamable wolf within him, but when they realized Harry possessed a kind, gentle human nature, they felt pained and let down. Thus, Harry, the Steppenwolf, was destined for solitude. In his youth, Harry lived in economic hardship and had to tighten his belt. But for the sake of freedom, he never sold himself for money or happiness, and certainly never wanted to take on some mediocre official post just to live a conventional life. He knew that those who pursue power are destroyed by it. Those who pursue money are also destroyed by money. Those accustomed to bowing are destroyed by their servility. And those who chase pleasure are destroyed by their debauchery. Harry finally achieved freedom, but at this point, he discovered that such freedom came at a price. While he would not be disturbed by anyone on the outside, he was also no longer connected to any people or events. That kind of freedom represented solitude, and also represented death. It was fate's judgment upon him. even if he now decided to accept constraints and return to the crowd. It was no longer possible. It wasn't that people hated or loathed him. It was that no one was genuinely willing to approach him and live alongside him anymore. On one hand, he was extremely solitary, actively withdrawing from the crowds. He believed that false socializing and secular noise were proof of spiritual death. But on the other hand, he yearned for someone who would truly understand and sympathize with him. In this state of conflict, the Steppenwolf Harry wanted to use suicide to escape it all. Yet, while he longed for the release of suicide, he also found a strange strength in facing death, allowing him to live. Thus, this suicidal struggle continued until he was 47 years old. At that moment, a rather humorous idea flashed through his mind: to choose his 50th birthday as his designated day to commit suicide. Instantly, it seemed as if all his troubles and misery could no longer bother him, because in just 2 years, Harry would bid farewell to all suffering and achieve true liberation. Towards the end of the booklet, Harry intended to better understand his fate by splitting himself into wolf and man, desire and spirit. He felt he had only 2 paths, either to pursue the spiritual pilgrimage or to drown in self-destructive desire. But his method of division was fundamentally flawed. Because human nature is absolutely not limited to just 2 elements, desire and spirit. Man is composed of hundreds, even thousands, of elements. Therefore, to truly understand himself, Harry had to realize that beyond his wolf nature, he harbored countless other beastly instincts. Only by learning to let them live in peace with each other could he truly achieve immortality. The above content details Harry's conflicts and suffering. Next, let's explore how he found salvation. After reading the booklet, Harry didn't choose the path of self-analysis and spiritual pilgrimage. He found that process too painful. Instead, he chose to end everything on his 50th birthday. But when he considered that the date was still 2 years away, Harry felt the time was still far too long. One day, Harry coincidentally met the man who had given him the booklet on the street. He hastily asked if there was any entertainment that night. Although the man was a bit confused, he gave Harry the address of a tavern called the Black Eagle. Afterward, Harry continued to wander aimlessly down the street. As he passed the library, he met a young professor. The two had conversed a few times before. This time, the professor immediately invited Harry to his home. Seemingly sensing a long-lost trace of warmth, Harry's human nature prompted him to accept the invitation. But his wolf nature immediately began to mock him. Just look at how well this brother of mine can lie. Only 2 minutes ago, he hated this world with a passion. Now, someone offers him a perfectly ordinary greeting, and he is deeply moved, completely immersed in that tiny bit of goodwill, respect, and intimacy. Naturally, the young professor was completely unaware of the argument between the two Harrys. That evening, Harry arrived at the professor's house. The young professor was reading the domestic pro-war newspaper. Holding the paper, he told Harry, "There's a politician in the paper with the same name as you, also Harry. But this man is a bad guy who doesn't love his motherland. He once mocked the emperor, declaring that both his own country and the enemy country were responsible for the outbreak of war." The professor had no idea that the traitor he was discussing was the very Harry sitting in front of him. Although Harry felt despair and utter dejection inside, he maintained a calm exterior. Later, Harry spotted a portrait of his idol, Gerda, in the room and couldn't help but make a few remarks. However, that particular painting was the professor's wife's most cherished piece. Harry's harsh comments made the professor's wife a bit sad and also made the professor slightly angry. As a result, they parted ways in an uncomfortable atmosphere. Leaving the professor's house, his human and wolf natures immediately began to criticize each other again. The agony of this internal quarrel was truly unbearable for him. He decided he would end his life that very night. But when he actually faced death, he started to feel afraid. Harry was always like this, constantly oscillating between countless moments of despair and cowardice. This time was no exception. The fear of death caused him to postpone his suicide and continue wandering. Finally, near midnight, he arrived at the entrance of an obscure tavern. Harry looked up and saw the name of the pub, the Black Eagle. Despite the late hour, the place was still packed. Before long, Harry met a woman named Hermann. Hermann was like a mirror, instantly seeing through his facade. She knew Harry hated the crowd, yet longed to be loved. He scorned the physical, yet craved indulgence. In Hermann's presence, Harry felt an unprecedented sense of ease. Hermann knew how to listen and sympathize, and eventually, She began to command him. She taught Harry how to eat, drink, sleep, listen to jazz, and even dance. She made Harry try things he had previously dismissed as vulgar and trivial. She told him he couldn't claim to understand life if he had never even danced. She understood that the old Harry was too rigid, obsessively pursuing high-minded, psychological art and complex, difficult tasks, but he had never learned the simple things. Hermine then introduced him to the dancer Maria and the musician Pablo. Gradually, with Maria, Harry rediscovered a love he hadn't felt in a long time. And so, under Hermione's guidance, Harry began to face the desires, wildness, and the instinct for abandon that he had long refused to acknowledge. In this decadent red light life, Harry couldn't even read a single word, even when he tried to pick up a book. Hermione said, "You demanded too much of this simple, comfortable, and easily satisfied world. Your desires are simply too great. As a result, this world vomited you out. The reason is that you are too unique. In today's world, if a person wants to survive and be happy all their life, they cannot be the kind of person you or I are. If someone refuses to listen to mediocre music and wants real music, if they want to reject low-level pleasures and seek true joy, if they want to reject money and seek a soul, if they want to reject busy chasing and seek real work, if they want to reject false socializing and seek true passion, then, in this vain world, this kind of person will never find their home." Put simply, in this age of technology and money, war and greed, traditional culture and humanistic ideas have been ravaged. People only worship technology, materialism, and self-interest. This is the central conflict of the era. Consequently, intellectuals like Harry, who refuse to flatter others yet see no way to reform society, are destined to suffer. Hermione's situation was also strikingly similar to Harry's. She was an intelligent, talented girl. She once set extremely high standards for herself, aspiring to live like a noble, archetypal figure. She could endure calamity, be a queen, the lover of a revolutionary, the sister of a genius, or the mother of a martyr, but real life only allowed her to become a call girl with a bit of refinement. To sum it up, the ideals were full, but the reality was painfully lean. Regarding Harry, his feelings for Hermine were complicated. Hermine told him not to over-idealize, but to learn to enjoy the present and follow life's flow. Even occasionally, releasing one's desires wasn't a sin. This, she argued, was filling the void of his wolf nature. But finding the subtle balance between these two things still rested entirely on Harry. Therefore, on one hand, Harry clung to Hermine as if she were a life raft. On the other hand, Hermine left him with a prophecy that he would eventually kill her with his own hands. This prophecy was to be fulfilled in the Magic Theater. Though called the Magic Theater, it was essentially a spiritual world. The entrance to the Magic Theater was at a masquerade ball. As the music blared and the frenzied dancers reached exhaustion, Hermione made her exit. Afterward, Pablo invited Harry to join this magical journey of soul exploration. Pablo told Harry, "I know you often feel fed up with your current life, and you especially long to leave this era, this world, this reality for another reality you deem more suitable. This is actually very simple. Your ideal world is, in fact, your own spiritual world. It exists within your inner self, and the Magic Theater can display the ideal world in your heart." But there was a precondition. Harry had to abandon his initial human and wolf personalities, because these personalities both dominated and imprisoned him. Only by breaking free from the old self could he truly accept who he was. To put it plainly, if you hold a prejudice against someone, you will only see their flaws. If they smile at you, you'll think they're being fake. If they do a good deed, you'll assume they have an ulterior motive. At this point, if you want to discover the good in that person, you must first forget your negative impressions of them. This principle holds true not only for people but for everything. So, when Harry relinquished his so-called personality, a large mirror appeared before him. Guided by Pablo, he began to observe himself through the glass. Initially, the reflection was the Harry he knew, but then the image suddenly dissolved, instantly splitting into hundreds, even thousands of different Harrys. Among these countless Harrys were men his own age, older men, and even Harrys who were frail old men. Furthermore, there were the serious Harrys and the lively, amusing Harrys. There were neatly dressed Harrys and raggedly clothed Harrys. They ran together in a chaotic mass, then scattered in different directions. finally entering various doors. Driven by curiosity, Harry pushed open one of those doors. A sign above read, "Jolly Car Hunt. Come on in." It was a noisy world, a fierce battlefield between man and machine. On one side, cars chased and ran over pedestrians. On the other, people with guns shot at the cars. Here, he met an old friend. Led by his friend, he hid in a large tree by the road and began to learn how to shoot at the speeding cars and drivers. Gradually, they both became immersed in the excitement and pleasure of the killing. In this frenzy of delight, Harry even found his former anti-war stance to be ridiculous. They increasingly failed to see the problem with their behavior and the harm they were inflicting on others. It wasn't until they saw a seemingly calm and innocent drunkard that one of them asked, "Could you bring yourself to shoot a man like that?" In that instant, both their consciences were awakened. They began to feel ashamed of their previous actions. This world originated from his hatred for modern mechanical civilization and his own inner violent tendencies. Next, Harry proceeded to the next door, labeled Steppenwolf Trainer. Inside, a show featuring a wolf trainer and a man trainer was taking place. A strong-looking tamer was on stage, demonstrating how to get a noble yet base wolf to perform circus tricks and a series of astonishing acts. During the performance, Harry could clearly see the wolf doing its utmost to suppress its instincts and follow the tamer's commands to perform amazing acrobatics. Quickly, in the next act, the roles of man and wolf were reversed. Now, the wolf had regained its primal nature, while the man lay prostrate on the ground, allowing the wolf to ride him, playing the part of a domesticated wolf. This made Harry realize that the wolf nature and human nature within him were actually confronting and taming each other. Simultaneously, the two skits, Jolly Car Hunt and Steppenwolf Trainer, made Harry see that his own inner world also harbored a dark side. He reflected on how foolish and laughable it was for him to have once advocated for humanism and opposed the war. This was because the hateful, ugly, barbaric, and foolish thoughts and scenarios conceived by the tamer, the general, or the madman were all latent within him too. Next, he opened a door labeled Any Girl's Room. Here, he met all the women he had ever known in his life. From puberty until now, he relived all the good feelings and emotions: love, happiness, infatuation, and even suffering. Gradually, Harry also discovered for the first time that the Steppenwolf, who appeared to be destitute and starved of love, had actually experienced a great deal of beautiful love in his life. These loves had never vanished, but were preserved intact within his inner world. Predictably, the last woman to appear was Hermann, but Harry didn't want to meet her there. So, he prematurely ended this romantic fairy tale world. Returning to the silent hallway, Harry saw a sign on the nearest door that read, "How to Kill for Love." Seeing these words, Harry suddenly remembered Hermione's prophecy. He fled in panic until he pushed open the very last door. However, the sight before him drove him mad. On the carpet lay two naked figures, Hermione and Pablo. Thus Harry, consumed by jealousy, didn't hesitate to pick up a knife and stab Hermione's body. The prophecy had come true. Having done everything, Harry knelt down, staring blankly. In that moment, he had lost the ability to think. Suddenly, the door opened, and Harry's idol, Mozart, walked in. He simply turned on the radio and played Handel's music. Mozart's actions were a little hard for Harry to accept. He couldn't stomach his idol using a radio to play music. But Mozart replied, "Times are changing, and so is life. We are compelled to go with the flow. Furthermore, people like Harry have no right to criticize the radio or life. He must first learn to listen, learn to treat seriously what deserves to be treated seriously, and abandon the mocking of everything else." Then, Mozart began to judge Harry's act of killing Hermione's image. As punishment, Harry would live eternally and be stripped of his right to enter the theater for 12 hours. Additionally, he would suffer the penalty of being laughed at once. As soon as he spoke, everyone present burst into laughter. The laughter was horrifying and unbearable. As for eternal life, for a man seeking release through death, there was no greater torture. Finally, Mozart told him, "You must learn to understand the humor in life. You should live. Learn to laugh. Learn to listen to this damn radio. The music of life. Learn to respect the spirit hidden beneath this music, and learn to sift out the ridiculous, worthless things in the music. Suddenly, Mozart transformed back into Pablo. He calmly turned Hermine back into a chess piece and put her into his pocket. Only then did Harry realize that everything he had experienced was merely a game. And his act of murder with the knife, to an outsider, would appear somewhat ridiculous. Looking at the hundreds, even thousands of game pieces in his pocket, he began to understand a little. He thought that one day he would learn how to play this game of life skillfully, and he would also learn how to laugh. The story concludes, Harry did not ultimately become a saint, nor did he go mad, but he received a profound revelation. He began to understand that life itself, and human nature itself, is a gigantic, perpetually tangled, mixed stew. Chaos, absurdity, and irrationality are not exceptions, but the normal state of things. If you want to keep living, don't dream of becoming a saint, and don't fantasize about being a free wild wolf. The only way out is to grit your teeth and admit that you and life are simply this way. And what Mozart meant by learn to laugh is the ability to find a small slice of joy amidst miserable days. His point wasn't to tell you to laugh out loud. It was to tell you that after clearly seeing the absurdity, contradictions, and irrationality of life and of yourself, you can still smile gently. Simply put, life cannot be taken too seriously, nor should you drive yourself into a corner. When facing difficulty, move forward with a bit of powerlessness, a dash of self-mockery, and a good measure of empathy for yourself and others. Since you know crying won't help, just offer a smile, even if that smile looks worse than a cry. In the end, Harry was simply too much of an idealist. After realizing that reality was too fake and too terrible, he drove himself into a dead end. The fundamental cause of his suffering wasn't that two monsters were fighting to the death inside him. It was his insistence on dividing his extremely complex, multifaceted nature, what the book calls 1,000 Harrys, into only human nature and wolf nature. He was always under the illusion that he had only two paths, either stepping into a pristine spiritual world or becoming a solitary wild wolf of pure desire. But these two pure states simply do not exist. Because humanity is chaotic, absurd, and diverse. To give an example, in real life, you might be someone who fears social interaction and dislikes talking. But that doesn't stop you from flexing online. You might post positive energy messages on social media during the day, yet still feel your feelings on a music streaming app late at night. When you want to just chill but fear poverty, or when you want to work hard but fear exhaustion, do you think you're being contradictory? Do you criticize yourself for it? Hesse tells you it is completely unnecessary. Don't label yourself, because you will never be fixed as just one type of person. You will change, he will change, and life will change too. Only when we truly understand that every thought, every personality trait belongs to our authentic self, can we genuinely accept ourselves. Writing to the end, I'm reminded of a quote. We are here to experience life, not to represent perfection.